Hi, folks. Thank you so much for joining us for the 2021 Rower Jerome Virtual Pilgrimage. My name is Erin Aoyama, and I am very pleased to introduce you to the speaker for our final panel of this weekend, Stu Hirai. So Stuart grew up as a sensei on an irrigated farm or ranch on the Oregon side of the Snake River in the Adrian-Nissa Vale, Ontario area of Malheur County, where Nisei mentors were instrumental in shaping his life into the person he is today. Stu went to high school in Nissa, attended the University of Oregon, graduated from Oregon State University, and received his Master of Science degree in hydraulic engineering from Colorado State University. After being employed for 35 years with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, Stu retired in 2012 as a water and power policy analyst. The Hirais were one of 350 families from the Portland, Oregon Assembly Center that were in the first Camp Without a Fence, featured in Uprooted in the photographs taken by Russell Lee and Dorothea Lange. Stu is currently working on a book about his Nisei mentors and how they shaped his life. Stu's also led small anniversary study tours to Italy in 2015 and 2019, and also attended tours to France in 2014 and 2019. Stu is also an active member on the Board of Governors for the Go for Broke National Education Center. So we are so lucky to have Stu here with us tonight to share a little bit of his incredible knowledge of history and training of the Nisei soldier. And then we'll have some time for questions towards the end. So please put anything in the chat. And welcome, Stu. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Erin. I really appreciate that nice introduction, and thank you for having me here. And thank you, audience, for being out there. I hope I will be able to inform and educate and provide and shed a little more light on the Nisei soldiers of World War II. We actually had an opportunity to record two veterans, Jack Nakamura in Hawaii and Yoshio Nakamura in California. So we will have a recording of their responses to some questions that were generated, and along this line of training and just general information regarding what the Nisei soldiers did during that part of World War II. But before I go any further, I want to introduce at least this Yoshio Nakamura, our first person who we interviewed. And he was in M Company of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team. He came in, I think, right after the Battle for the Lost Battalion. So he was in that wave after Italy. This is when they made landfall in France, but like I said, it was just right after the Lost Battalion. Yosh received his Combat Infantryman Badge, Bronze Star Medal, European Middle Eastern Ribbon with 3 battle stars, the French Legion of Honor Medal, and of course the Congressional Gold Medal. He used the GI Bill to obtain his Bachelor of Fine Arts, magna cum laude, and his Master of Fine Arts at USC, University of Southern California. Became a distinguished educator at Whittier High School, earning many distinctions and awards. And I understand at this exact time, he's at Whittier right now, being recognized for his accomplishments in that area. So congratulations to Yoshio. He became a distinguished educator at Whittier High School, earning many distinctions and awards, founding chair of the Fine Arts Department of the Rio Hondo College, and retired as vice president in 1992, named fellow of the college, and received many awards and honors from colleagues in the region, state, and national levels, including Person of the Year by the National Council on Community Services and Continuing Education. He's an active member on numerous boards, including Spirit Community, Whittier Regional Symphony, Whittier Art Association, Hillcrest Congregational Church, Hillcrest Festival of Fine Arts, Whittier Cultural Arts Commission, and Art and Public Places Advisory Committee. Yoshio is an accomplished artist, recognized for his artwork, having 175 private and public collectors, numerous awards, featured artist at the Hillcrest Festival of Fine Arts and in the Joseph Hirshhorn Museum of the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. Honored at baseball and football games, including on the Gopher Brook National Education Center float in the Tournament of Roses Parade in 2015, and I saw him on TV. Later this month, on April 24th, 2021, he was selected honorary walk chairperson of the shelter's right-hand 5,000 Walk, a fundraiser for the Women's and Children's Crisis Shelter in Whittier. Yoshio has three grown children. One of them, Linda, was on the 75th anniversary tour of Italy in 2019. So it was wonderful to have her come along and walk the trails that her dad probably ended up running from and on. The other person we have, he was unable to send me his biography, but he sent me kind of a short byline. And Jack, his first name actually is Seitoku. When I looked for Jack Nakamura in my database, I couldn't find it. So I gave his contact people a call and asked them, does Jack have a first name? And when they sent it to me, then I got all kinds of information about Jack. And he got his combat instrument badge, distinguished unit badge, Purple Heart with an oak leaf. And believe it or not, he is an Eagle Scout. So when you hear Jack speaking after Yosh, you'll get a sense on what being an Eagle Scout kind of is. And when we taped that segment, we were actually done with the interview, and he just kind of came up with a story, and it was so comical, so end of the war, prisoner of war kind of thing that we just had to show it. So anyhow, hopefully that'll provide a little levity to this presentation. I just want to give a little background on this training, because in all the material that I've read and gone through, they just kind of talk briefly about the training. And in the preview that you saw before I came on and Aaron came on, those are the kind of things that they did. They did things to build bodies, develop stamina, but that's pretty much what basic training is. But the thing that I really wanted to emphasize is, well, how did they get to be the kind of unit that they were? Because it's like Jack said, or Yoshio said in his interview, it's kind of like on-the-job training. And it's kind of hard to get on-the-job training when you're in basic training, because nobody's shooting at you. Nobody's shooting artillery shells at you. So it's a much different environment. And from what a lot of veterans have told me, is that after the first shot, all plans go to pot. So anyhow, what's interesting about World War II is that there were about 4,000 Nisei in the military before Pearl Harbor. They were drafted, they enlisted, they went through their own basic training. They were posted in various posts throughout the country. It was not segregated. Okay, so when the war broke out, these Nisei were essentially taken away from their specialty areas. They couldn't be in the Navy, Coast Guard, although there was exceptions, and even in the Navy, there's some exceptions. Definitely in the Air Corps as pilots, but there's an exception there because I think there was a Nisei pilot that flew spotter planes for the 522nd Field Artillery. They couldn't be in armor, Signal Corps, Chemical Corps, or Ordnance. Okay, so but they could be in the Merchant Marine. In fact, there's one Nisei who was in the Navy Reserve. He had to resign and join up with the Merchant Marine. So there were quite a few Nisei who were part of the Merchant Marine Force that served. So essentially, the basic training, the length is anywhere from 11 to 17 weeks. It kind of varied depending on the year and the demand. Like, for example, when the Battle of the Bulge hit, they went from 17 weeks down to 11 because they needed troops to replenish those that were lost, killed, or captured during that Battle of the Bulge. So there's special circumstances during the war where that happened. The other part of the training is on November 1st, 1941, the 4th Army group had started up a training course for Nisei, for the military intelligence school, language school at Christie Field at the Presidio. And of course, when the war broke out, then that 1-year course turned into like 6 months. And the first class had about 30 Nisei soldiers and 2 Caucasians. They were immediately sent to the Pacific. They went to Alaska, Australia, New Caledonia, and the other 10 or so, they had to go to Camp Savage because of the executive order 9066. They had to move inland. So Camp Savage was the location for the MIS-LS, and then when it got to be too small, then they moved to Fort Snelling in Minnesota. So anyhow, before World War II even started, there were a lot of Nisei that were undergoing training at the Presidio, and it was just, really interesting because some of those Nisei had actually gone through basic training, but for the ones who came afterward, basic training really wasn't a requirement. And after the fighting in the Pacific was going along, a lot of the Nisei were saying, well, how am I supposed to protect myself? And so there was an abbreviated training for the Nisei and the MIS at Camp Shelby. So they did some training, but it wasn't the full 11 weeks. It was just, I think, learn the basics on how to survive and how to shoot back if they had to. In Hawaii, there were about 1,432 Nisei that were part of the 299th Infantry Regiments of the Hawaii National Guard. And when Pearl Harbor hit, they were federalized, they were mobilized. And they did what any soldier would do, is to protect the homeland, which is what they did. But a lot of the military, politicians, some of the locals didn't quite trust them, and it was really a tough time for them. And the military was still trying to figure out what to do with these Nisei soldiers who had rifles and knew how to use them. So they were redesignated the Hawaiian Provisional Infantry Battalion. They were put on a transport ship under escort and sent to the mainland in June 1942. And when they made landfall at Oakland, California docks, they were redesignated as the 100 Infantry Battalion Separate. The Separate is a designation that means they had no mother. So from there, they boarded 3 separate trains that went 3 separate directions to get to Camp McCoy. And then here they go, they undergo more training. I think the 100th Battalion probably had more, they were definitely overtrained. They were definitely oversized because they actually had six rifle companies. So oversized, overtrained, and they started their training in earnest. So in the meantime, when the 100th Battalion got to Camp McCoy, several dozen of the Nisei soldiers of the 100th were shipped off to Camp Savage to join up with the MIS. And so that caused a drain. And then the thing that's really interesting about this training, and I read this in Lieutenant Colonel James Hanley's book, it was really an interesting experience where he overheard a conversation between a newspaper person and a Nisei soldier. And the soldier told the reporter that he was surprised the kind of training that he was getting because these this these officers, this unit, expects me to survive. And Colonel Hanley thought that was an interesting statement, and he actually thought about that for quite a while. And he talked to the chaplains about it, and the chaplains from Hawaii explained that for the Nisei soldiers who were in the remote locations of Hawaii, they still had the old values, the old ways, and the Issei first generation, they were expected to give a son for the emperor, and that the son was not expected to return. So that's the kind of thing that we saw in the Pacific over and over and over again. These banzai charges by the Japanese troops, they would rather kill themselves than surrender. But there were some that did surrender, and some that were taken prisoner, which helped shorten the war in the Pacific by 2 years and saving countless lives. But anyhow, it was just interesting with that kind of the thought process of many of the Nisei soldiers that, you know, for them this is one way trip. But after the training that they received, and it was top-notch training. I mean, they got the best equipment. In fact, they had Nisei there. They were pretty good scroungers, and I could fully attest to one of them being my former scoutmaster, Tom Nishitani. He was scoutmaster for Troop 419, and he was one of the chief warrant officers in the service company. And he actually was drafted in June of 1941. So by the time the 442nd was formed up, he was already a top sergeant, and eventually became one of two chief warrant officers in the 442nd Service Company. So anyhow, with the kind of scroungers that they had in the 442nd, there's no doubt in my mind they had the best equipment. So that the part of the training that's also interesting is that after doing a lot of research in this area, you know, the Nisei trained at a lot of camps, but there's one in particular. It's called Camp Blanding in Florida, where quite a few companies of Nisei soldiers were trained in Camp Blanding, and they went in where I think it was at that point about 17 weeks of training. I think Jack mentioned 17 weeks, and in some of the discussions I had with Yo, she mentioned 17 weeks too at Camp Blanding. My dad trained at Camp Blanding. So anyhow, the training was it was segregated. When the Nisei got together at Camp Blanding, they all trained as Nisei. They slept in the same barracks, they trained together. So, and that made sense because when the training was finished, they all went back to Camp Shelby, and they were either undergo some training there for a short time and then ship out together with as a replacement, or with the unit that shipped out in latter part of May 1944. So that was interesting concept too, is that during World War II, when the soldiers shipped out, especially in this segregated unit, they all shipped out together in large groups. And I think that, especially coming back from combat, I think that allowed a lot of the soldiers to decompress. And I think it really helped with the healing, at least the starting of the healing process, because the kind of combat that the Nisei soldiers went through in Italy, France, and what the 522nd went through in Germany when they found those labor and death camps, it must have been horrendous. Now, the boot camp itself, it's extremely physical. I mean, I don't think I could do it, even as a kid. I mean, I was pretty wiry anyway, but the kind of training these guys did. I mean, their average height was about 5'4", which was 2 inches below the standard. They, I think they weighed anywhere from 110 to 125 pounds. They were, pretty slender. But then there were some others who were pretty good sized. And it was kind of funny because I was talking to Linda, who's Yoshio's daughter, about the base plate. And the base plate for a mortar is pretty heavy. And when I met up with some veterans at a 3rd Infantry Division reunion, I saw the shortest guy there. So I went right over to him. I mean, this guy's about 4 feet 6 inches tall. And I'm looking down at him and I asked him, well, what was your position in combat? And he said, I was in a mortar platoon. I said, oh, did you have the tube? I said, no, I had the base plate. So for some reason, they gave the base plate to the smallest person in the unit. And he must have been a replacement, because I think that's what they did just to build some strength in these soldiers. But it was pretty comical to hear his response. But boy, he was a tough soldier. But all of the soldiers, when they went through basic training, just the same kind of things. In fact, when Tom Nishitani, when we went on camp outs, we'd be around the campfire, and he would look up and say, don't silhouette yourself in front of the campfire. Don't stand in front of a doorway. If you're going to be outside, stay in the shadows. And when you walk a mountain or a hill, don't walk at the crest of the hill, because if you do that, then the enemy can see you. So these are the kind of things that they teach you during basic training. It seemed like it's common sense, but none of these soldiers have ever been in combat before. So what may be common to a common soldier is not common to a civilian. So it takes a lot of training, a lot of repetition, and a lot of, hey, keep your head down. And Yo says that, it's keep your head down. Don't stand up, crawl, so there's all kinds of things. Don't worry about getting your uniform dirty. It's better to be dirty than dead. So anyhow, these soldiers trained all kinds of physical activities, physical training. They had obstacles. They marched, they drilled, they swam, they crawled, they climbed. They hiked various types of terrain, close order combat with a bayonet with a sheath on it, battle courses, infiltration and evasion, protection of military information, enemy information, combat intelligence and counterintelligence, including live fire drill exercises. They were also trained to detect anti-tank and anti-personnel mines and booby traps. And when they got in the combat zone, they got some real good experience. They were trained to fire, clean, load, and dismantle any weapon in the company, including the 1911 semi-automatic pistol, M1 rifle, M1 carbine, M1918 Browning automatic rifle, the Browning M1919 machine gun, M260 and 81 millimeter mortar, grenade launchers, bazookas, grenades, etc. They also learned to use captured enemy weapons, and they use it to great advantage, because at certain times in the battle at Bifontaine, there's some incidents in Italy where they ran out of ammunition. The supply chain didn't get to them. They ended up using captured German weapons. So, like I say, these soldiers used whatever they could, because they weren't going to surrender, unless they absolutely had to. But the big thing is keeping a low profile. And I know I do this on my tours. I keep a low profile, stay in the back, try not to be a target. So anyhow, and then if you smoke cigarettes, that's one thing you don't do in combat when you're on the line, or even smoking in a trench, because they can see the embers. So things like that. I mean, it's just, these are kind of things that they trained you, and they trained you to survive, to live, and to fight another day. But the other thing too is, you're always aware of your surroundings. You're just always aware. You're mindful. very Buddhistic thing, is to be mindful, be aware of what's around you, what's going on, but don't be hyper vigilant. So there's a happy balance there. The other thing too is remember call signs and passwords. And this is something that Shig Doi told me when I was with him in France. He said, carry 2 canteens. You always need water. Carry 2 canteens. Throw the gas mask away. And then, of course, carry extra socks. And then never, ever pick up any item on the ground because it could be booby trapped. In Italy and in France, the enemy would booby trap the dead. So the thing also to kind of keep in mind is never salute an officer in a combat zone. And I'm sure there's a lot of you folks out there who are military vets that could come up with a lot of others. But one of my favorite things is don't stand next to a person who shoots an automatic weapon, because that's the first thing that the enemy will go after. The next will be the officer, and the next will be the senior ranking non-com. So anyhow, there's some things that you learn, but you probably find that out in a combat zone. Now, when the replacements finally started to be sent to the 100, because the 100th, their first days of combat was September 29th, 1943. So by the time they slogged their way up northwesterly up the ankle, the shin bone toward Casino, they got the distinction of being called the Purple Heart Battalion because of they incurred so many losses. So out of the 1,300 men that they had in their oversized battalion, they were down to around 521 effectives, 521 men standing. So they desperately needed replacements. So the first group of replacements came on March 10th, the second one on April 2nd, and the third one on May 24th. And what's interesting about May 24th is that May 23rd and 24th was the beginning of the breakout of Anzio. And I think you'll hear a little story from Jack about what happens when you volunteer. And that's another thing. You don't volunteer. So anyhow, they had some replacements, but it was still not up to full strength. I think they only had less than 1,100 men. And of course, the last 120 or so, they didn't reach the line until May 24th. So they weren't going to do any good up to that point because they were still in a combat zone on the beaches of Anzio. So now we're getting about that time period where May 23rd, May 24th, breakout of Anzio, the 100th, they're slugging their way up toward Rome. They have a couple of intense battles that they have to go through, and I think that's where Jack earns a second Purple Heart. But on June 4th, the fall of Rome, shortly thereafter, that's when the 442nd makes landfall, and the 100th Infantry Battalion is attached to the 442nd. They become the 1st Battalion, but they keep their designation as the 100th Infantry Battalion of the 442nd 1st Battalion. So all the rest of the regiment starts to filter in, and by September 20th, they're out practicing and getting acquainted, cleaning up their weapons. And on June 26th, that's the 442nd's first day of combat. And things don't go very well for the 2nd and 3rd Battalion. The 100th Battalion, they're held in reserve. And they're watching from a high hill, and they're seeing their buddies, their cousins and brothers and uncles, younger uncles, getting beat up by the Germans because there's a loss of communication. Second Battalion thinks that they're astride of the Third Battalion, but the Second Battalion actually makes more headway than the Third Battalion, and so they're actually kind of not completely surrounded, but they're out there with their butts hanging out, and they're getting shot up. In fact, Jack Wakamatsu, in his book Silent Warrior, says that he spent most of the day ducking a sniper. So he couldn't go anywhere. But the 100th, they saw what was going on, and they broke out the battle maps and looked at the situation. About that time, they get a call from Colonel Pence saying, okay, let's go. And the 100 said, we're ready. So at noon, they kicked off, and by the next day, they'd actually wipe out an entire German battalion. And that's where the 100th got their first presidential unit citation. So there's a lot of things that the 100th imparted on their brothers of the 442nd on that day. And, I think there's a lot of humbleness going on, but that's how you survive. And there's one soldier of the 100th whose younger brother was in the 442nd, and he was writing that he hopes that he taught his brother enough to stay out of trouble. So hopefully, they all made it out okay. But as I said before, training is the key, and I've got some pictures that I want to show. And since I'm such a aficionado of the Gothic Line battle, this first picture I'm going to show you is what the 100th Battalion was looking at 0458 on April 5, 1945. Of course, they didn't see these signs that says Georgia Hill or Florida or Ohio 1, 2, 3, and whatever. But if you look at Georgia Hill is actually just a little behind Florida Hill. So when the 100th Battalion took off at 4:58 a.m., they were charging up this hill, and they started probably right there at the bottom of the frame of this picture. And as you see Georgia Hill, that's where they're going. They're making a beeline for Georgia Hill. And at that time period, I mean, even after the artillery preparation by the division with 105s and 155s, the Germans had quite a few months to consolidate their position. They had bunkers, fortified bunkers, mines, you name it, they had it. And the 100th A, B, and C Company, they're charging up that hill toward Georgia Hill. And of course, when the Germans on Florida Hill, which is actually closer to the line of debarkation, the Germans on Florida Hill says, well, we're getting out of here. They don't want to be surrounded. So they start charging off the hill. And so the 100 Battalion, they're charging up Georgia Hill. Of course, they run into a minefield and small arms fire, machine gun fire, grenades. I read somewhere where there were at least 6 to 8 hand grenades in the air at any one time during that battle. And for a short time, they faltered. And with the heroics of a few persons, one of them being Sadao Munamori, it rallied these replacements. And you got to remember, April 5, 1945, this was after the Lost Battalion, even though there was an infusion of replacements during the Champagne campaign and the relatively quiet front along the Little Maginot Line, along the French-Italian border, the Maritime Alps. They still had some good training that they did, and they went on patrols. But for these replacements, this was their first combat. So they're charging up that hill. They falter. Several of the veterans of the 100, they take matters in hand, and they knock out machine gun nests and whatnot. And you know what? At 0530, 32 minutes after the battle started. Platoons, 2nd Platoon and 3rd Platoon of A Company reaches the crest of Georgia Hill. 32 minutes. When I was there back in 2015, I looked up that hill and I go, man, this is tough. I don't think I can do it. But the next day or so, the 100th meets up with the L Company of the 442nd at Mount Soretta. The 442nd I&L Company, they actually took Mount Fogarito in about 90 minutes. They got off to a slow start. They started their fighting at about 6 o'clock. But once they took Mount Fogarito, then it was all literally downhill from there. So, and they met up at Mount Soretta. But it's the training. I want to emphasize, it's the training. Even with these new replacements, they knew that if they didn't move forward, they were going to get killed anyway. And what's interesting thing too is that all the things I've read about the 142nd, when they couldn't take an objective, they didn't march down the hill. They dug in, and their saying was, "We're not going to pay for the same real estate twice, not with blood." The next slide. And this shows how rough, how steep this terrain is. Mount Fogarito's got that little blue balloon on it there. That's Mount Fogarito. And that little bald spot there on the right, that's Ozzano. That's where the Nisei stayed the night before. And they kept out of eyesight because the Germans were on Mount Fogarito. They could see everything that was going on. So 442nd 3rd Battalion, they sneaked up at night and gone into Ozzano. And then I think about 10 o'clock on the 4th, April 4th, they hiked down from Ozzano, crossed the stream, and there was 2 trails that led up to the crest, the ridgeline of Mount Fogarito. I Company was on the one ridgeline, L Company was on the other with an attached M Company or M mortar platoon. Next slide. This is the route that the I&L Company and then K Company took it the next day. Of course, during the day, they took a lot of losses. But this shows the ruggedness. We're talking 60-degree terrain. Next slide. And this is the path that L Company took to get up to top of Mount Fogarito. This was the only way that they could do it because machine guns were off to the right and they had machine guns up on the hill. So the only way to get there was to come up to the backside, and this is the path. And let me tell you, with battle gear and people, Germans shooting at you and tossing hand grenades, that was a tough thing to go through. But they did it. 90 minutes. Next slide. And this is the map that I shamelessly borrowed from Thomas Murphy. Shows the route that A Company 100 Battalion took to take Florida, Georgia Hill, Ohio 123, Rocky Ridge, and then meeting up with L Company of the 442nd. And then the map on the left shows how they got to where they needed to go to as far as the whole 442nd. And then the next map, next picture. And this is from Lynn Crow's book showing the fighting from April 5 to I think mid-May or something like that. But the Nisei soldiers, they were mountain fighters, and that's what they did. They fought in the mountains in Italy. They fought in the mountains in France. But without that training and the stick-to-itiveness that they had, they couldn't have done this. And William Yarborough, who was commander of the 473rd Infantry Regiment that took the coastal highway, he said that he loved the Nisei soldiers. They were professional and they were good. Not only that, they were smart. So, they weren't going to take any chances, to lose men. They would think about a way to take an objective at the least possible cost. So I think right now, it's a good time to have a segue and see some videos from Yosh. Nakamura, and Jack.
The first question is, what did I think of boot camp? My boot camp experience in Camp Landing was mixed. Some rigorous physical training made us stronger and contributed to our being ready for combat. I learned how to use the weapons and how to defend myself. Probably the most positive experience for me was meeting other Nisei soldiers from around the country, including Hawaii. Question 2, how was the interaction with personnel involving other units training in Camp Landing? We seemed to be appreciated for taking the training seriously, and they were impressed by our performances. Question number 3, what was the nearest city to Camp Landing? It was Jacksonville, Florida. It is there I met my high school friend, Bob Berlin, who was training dogs to help U.S. soldiers. While waiting for him, I went to a diner in Jacksonville and had breakfast. And when I got up to pay, the cashier said, "See that man walking out? He paid your bill." That was a very uplifting experience. The next question, if I can find it, is, did I meet any Nisei women near Camp Landing? I saw none. When were you sent overseas? When you were sent overseas, did you undergo more indoctrination, training with the 100th Battalion, 442nd Regimental Combat Team? Well, I was assigned to L Company in France and do not remember any additional training when I joined the 442nd, except to follow orders and suggestions of my squad, platoon, and company. Keeping a low profile was a must. Many of my assignments were made during the evening and night, so I was not aware of a lot of things going around me. The sixth question, were there enhancements in training once you got into the combat zone? Sometime before our move to Italy, I was assigned to M Company, a heavy weapons company. I recall my squad leader, Tom Kinaga, gave us instructions on what not to do, especially to stand up and become a target. The old-timers in my company were very good at protecting us and giving suggestions. However, combat life is very different from basic training. Much of the learning comes on the job. Question number 7, how were you treated after the war when you got out? My first experience after being discharged was in Nebraska. I was amazed to learn that the Nisei in Wyoming, northern Colorado, and Nebraska would occasionally get together and have parties or meetings. That was a new experience for me. However, when we moved to California, it was very difficult to find a place to stay. The propaganda against Japan was so effective on the West Coast that it took a long time for the good works of the 442nd, 100th Battalion, and the Military Intelligence Service to displace some of the negative images. But life did become better in time. Then the next question. What did you think about the Go for Broke Soldiers stamp being released in June? This tribute to the Nisei veterans of World War II is very timely, and I'm very thankful for all the people who brought about the Go for Broke Forever stamp to be issued by the U.S. Postal Service. The stamp will help combat Asian American hate caused by people blaming China for the pandemic. Thank you.
Yes, Jack, I have some questions for you that would like to ask you. You know, when you were back in the islands, you know, when you saw the Japanese attacking Pearl Harbor, you know, what were your thoughts when that was happening?
You know, when Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, I thought, oh, maneuver. All of a sudden, the airplane come near me. It was really bullets. I said, oh, for right. These guys are for real. So I went up the roof and I looked down and said, hey, these guys are for real. It's not maneuver. And then I saw two planes up there. I said, oh, look at that. It's a dogfight between a Japanese plane and an American airplane. They're far away. They had a fight, and one plane went down, and the other plane flew away. Then that's when I knew that was real war. They say, we are escaping Japanese American to see if these guys are Japanese or American. So my mother said, don't sign up, son, don't sign up. You might get a war against your cousins someday. But all my friends signed up, so I signed up. So my mother said, I told you, son, don't sign up, but you signed up. They said, son, since you disobeyed me and signed up for American Army, don't you embarrass the name Nakamura? I said, yes, Mom. And I signed up for 442. While we were training in Camp Chalmers, Mississippi, 100 Infantry Battalion soldiers, some of them got killed, some of them wounded. So they get out. They said, we need some volunteers to join the 100 Infantry Battalion and go into war. So I signed up. 2 days after I signed up in Asia, they bust me up. I said, gee, did I volunteer for this? They give me a good licking. Bang! My friend Nakanishi flew about 40 feet artillery hit out there, and other artillery hit me. I mean the same one. I flew about 30 feet. I thought I was dead. So I was looking for God. I couldn't hear a thing. I couldn't see a thing. So, and then about 15, 20 minutes later, somebody said, Sergeant, get up. Oh, I'm not dead. So I volunteered and went back into battle again. That was my first Purple Heart.
So you were actually part of the
Oh,
group that arrived, one of the two groups that arrived just after the Battle of Monte Cassino. So Anzio was in May. I started on May 23rd, May 24th, 1944.
yeah,
So your boot camp was at Camp Shelby for what, 17 weeks?
Camp Shelby, yeah, Mississippi, yeah.
Okay, all right.
When I went to France and Germany, it was rain, snow, but we had a combat uniform. We don't have anything else because when you go into combat, you don't carry extra clothes, you know? Just a combat uniform, your rifle, and oh boy, it was cold. Just like in Berlin, when Texas Division, the Germans had the Texas Division trapped, so they asked the 100 Battalion to come help them untrap them. Oh, we went up, climb up the mountain and come surprise the Germans, and we started battle with them. It was a tough battle, cold through the snow. It was so cold that I had 20 feet. The feet come all numb. I can hardly walk. So I went to the hospital, and then when I went to the hospital, I talked to the nurse, and one of the guys from Texas Division said, boy, they rescued us. 442, 100% rescued us. He said, I never thought I'd be thankful to see Jack. The nurse looked at me, he said, you should have left him over there. Oh, the nurse was mad, boy. You rescue him. You rescue him, and he called you a Jack. I said, I don't think he meant it that derogatory way. I said, I thought maybe he just used the wrong word. I gave the children chocolate candy. Oh, they were so happy that I gave them chocolate. they invite me for dinner. I don't know if I should, I don't know if I did the right thing or not, but I kind of refused the dinner because they don't have any food. The Germans took all the food away, and they have very little food. And they invited me, and like I said, I don't know if I did the right thing or not. I refused. But the next day, I went into my United States kitchen. I stole some food, and I gave them some. I don't know if I did the right thing or not, but don't tell anybody I stole it. Prisoner of war. I was in charge, so I got them all. They were drinking. They were drinking. They were singing. Da, 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 da. And when they saw me with my rifle, they stopped singing. So I said, does anybody speak English? Two Germans stopped up and said, yeah, I speak English. They said, my name is Sergeant Nakamura, what's yours? He said, my name is Eric. And the other guy said, my name is Rudolph. Oh, okay. So I went down to the bartender. I put down $20. I said, beer, I mean wine for everybody. Oh, was it beer they're drinking? The bartender said, no. He said, give it back to me. He said, we treat you. So I drank with them. I drank with them. I drink with them all night. Next time, when I wake up in the morning, I was in the bunk. That guy, the German prisoner of war, carried me up my bunk. Yeah. I drank with them all night. Next day, I had a hangover. I saw these two Germans with my rifle come running toward me. I said, oh my God, they got me. They give me the rifle and said, officer coming. I grabbed the rifle. I said, sir. The officer came and said, oh, everything seems to be okay. Yes, sir. Carry on, Sergeant.
Aujourd'hui, nous avons commémoré le 14 juillet la fête nationale et la libération de la ville de Bruyères par les Américains. Nous avons été en présence du dernier vétéran aujourd'hui à Bruyères et aujourd'hui encore, son attitude force respect vis-à-vis de la population de notre région.
Et les Américains, c'est nos libérateurs, hein. Ils sont combattus, ils étaient tout jeunes. Hein, là, il y a des vétérans, il y en a un qui est là, il a 96 ans. Il était tout jeune, il a combattu avec ses copains. Là. On est ému devant les monuments, je sais que moi, ça choque. Hein, c'est à l'âge là. Hein.
La population locale a été durement touchée ici. C'est pour ça que nous organisons des manifestations comme aujourd'hui, pour leur dire encore merci et cultiver le devoir de mémoire.
Bruyères ne peut pas oublier cette histoire. Il faut savoir que les combats de ces hommes ont été absolument héroïques et j'ai tenu à saluer dignement M. Lawson Sakai parce qu'il était là il y a 75 ans, il a été blessé. Je tenais absolument à le mettre à l'honneur, même si c'est le 14 juillet et dans le cadre de la fraternité des peuples, je trouvais que c'était tout à fait approprié de l'honorer.
Ici, on y pense encore souvent et on tient absolument à conserver cette mémoire.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Stu, for the wonderful history you shared, and then for those videos. They're moving, and those stories from both Yosh and from Jack are just incredible to hear. So thank you so much for helping us pull this together. Folks watching might notice that I am not Jack Nakamura. Unfortunately, we were hoping to have him join us today, but it was not to be. So I'm glad we had that recording from just earlier this week. But Stu, to sort of wrap up this incredible program, I wanted to ask you one audience question that was also a question I had for you, which came in a little bit ago and just asked, how can I find out what military actions my grandfather was part of? He never spoke of anything about that time, so I'm not sure where to start. So this question of for descendants or just folks trying to learn more about these men and these soldiers, what's a good place to start? What's the process that you recommend?
Yeah, well, the Gopher Brook Natural Education Center, Densho, is a good place to start. And also Stu Hirai. I have a database. So it's about 30,000 records. So if you send Kimiko your name, your grandfather's name, and I mean the full name, and his unit, and if you happen to have this, his Army service number, that would be great. But I don't need it. I have that in my database already. So once I get the information, I can do a lot of cross-referencing. But like I said, I can reach out and help you out.
And
You're not alone. You're not alone.
I can personally attest to Stu's. I sent him some information this afternoon, and within an hour, you had gone back to me with a newspaper article, which was incredible. So thank you so much, Stu. Is there anything you'd like to sort of leave our audience with this evening as we wrap up this program?
Just thank those veterans that are still out there. I just want to also thank Professor Mark McClure. I met him back in 2019, and I just found out about his passing, and his wife tells me that she's going to finish the project. So he interviewed a lot of Nisei soldiers. So I'm hoping that that'll also tell their story. And the other thing too is find out more about your relatives and what they did during the war to assure that we have a future. Because that's what I've been doing. I'm going to carry on their legacy as long as I can.
Yeah, and I'm so looking forward to your book whenever that is done and available.
Me too.
Well, thank you so much, Stu. Thank you, folks watching at home. Thanks to those of you who tuned in this whole weekend. Thank you so much, Kimiko, backstage, running everything, making this all go so smoothly. This has been wonderful. I hope everyone watching stays healthy, stays safe, stays well. And thank you so much. We'll see you again soon. Thank you, Stu.